Life in the Middle Ages was a daily test of endurance, ingenuity, and sheer willpower. Unlike today, survival was never guaranteed. Famine, disease, harsh winters, and unpredictable violence were constant companions. Yet, despite these challenges, ordinary people, from peasants in small villages to townsfolk in bustling cities, developed remarkable strategies to survive. These medieval survival hacks were born out of necessity, blending resourcefulness, local knowledge, and centuries of trial and error. When crops failed or markets ran dry, people turned to the forests, fields, and rivers to feed themselves. Foraging was an essential skill, and medieval peasants became experts at identifying edible plants, roots, and berries. Nettles, dandelions, and wild garlic were often used to supplement meals, while acorns and chestnuts could be ground into flour during hard times. Rivers and streams provided not just water, but also fish, which were a crucial protein source for those living far from the sea. Even insects and small game occasionally found their way onto plates, especially during famine years. Knowing which plants were safe and which were poisonous could mean the difference between life and death. Folklore, passed down orally, often guided these decisions. Some villages even maintained herb gardens outside homes, cultivating medicinal and edible plants to ensure at least a modest food supply year-round. Storage was vital because winters could last months and crop failures were common. Medieval people developed several preservation methods to stretch their food supply. Salting meat and fish was common. The salt drew moisture out, preventing bacteria from spoiling the food. Smoking was another widespread method, particularly in colder regions. Fish, pork, and beef could be hung over smouldering fires for days or weeks, producing a shelf-stable food source. Pickling vegetables in vinegar or fermenting them in brine was also popular. Cabbage, turnips, and onions were routinely preserved this way, creating staples like sauerkraut that could be stored in cellars. Drying fruits, grains, and herbs was another hack, allowing them to last for months without spoiling. Even hard cheeses and butter could survive the winter if stored in cool, dark spaces. These preservation techniques not only saved lives during harsh months, but also became integral parts of medieval diets. When sickness struck, medieval people had limited options beyond prayer, superstition, and herbal remedies. Yet, many folk cures were surprisingly effective. Willow bark, for instance, contains salicin, a natural painkiller that works similarly to modern aspirin. Chamomile and mint were used to soothe stomach ailments, while garlic was believed to ward off infections. Monks and local healers often maintained detailed herbal guides, and knowledge of local flora was passed from generation to generation. Smallpox, dysentery, and influenza could decimate villages, but careful attention to hygiene, diet, and herbal treatments sometimes made the difference between survival and death. Honey was another essential ingredient. It acted as both a sweetener and an antiseptic, used on wounds to prevent infection.
Access to clean water was a constant challenge. People relied on wells, rivers, and collected rainwater. Boiling water was a known but labour-intensive survival hack that helped reduce disease. Villagers often used herbs like mint, thyme, or sage to flavour and purify water. Public bathhouses existed in some towns, but most peasant households relied on small tubs or basins. Hygiene was rudimentary by modern standards, but people learned practical ways to avoid illness. Washing hands before meals, even if infrequent, could limit the spread of germs. Using vinegar or aromatic herbs in bathing water helped mask odours and reduce bacterial growth. Even simple techniques like keeping living spaces ventilated or removing animal waste from homes were considered survival hacks in their own right, particularly in crowded villages. Survival wasn't just about food and medicine. It was also about staying warm. Winters in medieval Europe could be brutal, and without proper clothing, frostbite and hypothermia were real threats. Wool was the go-to material, as it kept warmth even when wet. Layering was key. Undergarments of linen, a wool tunic, and a heavy cloak or coat could make life in freezing temperatures bearable. Peasants often wore patched clothing passed down through generations, while wealthier individuals had access to furs and heavier fabrics. Footwear, too, was critical. Wooden clogs, leather boots, or wrapped cloth provided insulation and protection from frozen ground and muddy streets. In many regions, people learned to stuff shoes with straw or wool for added warmth, a simple hack that could save lives during extreme cold snaps. Constructing a reliable shelter was a matter of survival. Peasant huts were simple, often made of wattle and daub, with thatched roofs, while castles and stone houses provided better protection for the wealthy. Heating these structures was a challenge. Hearth fires served both for cooking and warmth, and people learned to build efficient fire pits and use locally available fuel like wood, peat, or coal. Raising the sleeping platform above the ground, layering it with straw and furs, and covering windows with oiled cloth were clever hacks to conserve heat. During extreme winters, entire families might huddle together near the fire for warmth, while livestock was sometimes brought indoors to share body heat. Smoke control was another concern. Venting chimneys properly prevented suffocation, while the smoky air kept insects away. Hunting small game, trapping animals, and fishing were essential survival strategies, especially for peasants living near forests or rivers. Traps for rabbits, snares for birds, and simple fishing nets or lines provided protein when crops were scarce. Hunting required knowledge of animal behavior, seasons, and safe weapon use. Villagers often shared hunting techniques in communal settings, ensuring that even the less skilled could catch something to eat. Fishing was particularly important during Lent or other religious periods when meat consumption was restricted. Rivers, lakes, and ponds were carefully managed, and some villages even practiced basic aquaculture by stocking ponds with fish for long-term consumption. These hacks, though simple, allowed communities to supplement their diets and survive lean years. When money was scarce, survival depended on careful management of resources. Bartering became a key skill. A farmer might trade eggs or grain for tools or clothing, while a blacksmith might exchange services for food. Knowing the value of items, negotiating fairly, and maintaining good relationships with neighbours were vital hacks for survival. Storage was another form of resource management. Villagers carefully rationed grain, flour, and meat to last until the next harvest. Potatoes, though introduced later, and other long-lasting vegetables were highly prized. Hoarding was sometimes frowned upon by authorities, but smart storage and careful planning often meant the difference between life and starvation. Survival was rarely an individual endeavour. Villages, monasteries, and guilds created social safety nets. Community members shared labour during harvests, built homes together, and provided care for the sick. Religious institutions often distributed food, medicine, and shelter to the needy. Belonging to a guild or cooperative was also a survival hack. Tradesmen, artisans, and farmers pooled resources, shared knowledge, and protected each other during hard times. Even informal networks, friends, relatives, and neighbours served as lifelines, offering shelter, food, or protection when calamity struck. Finally, survival wasn't just physical, it was mental. Living under constant threat of famine, disease, or violence required extraordinary resilience. Religion played a crucial role, providing comfort, structure, and hope. Daily prayers, festivals, and communal rituals gave people a sense of purpose and the psychological stamina to endure hardships. Mental resilience also came from practical experience. Children learned survival skills early, observing elders and participating in daily chores. Storytelling and folk tales reinforced lessons about danger, cunning, and resourcefulness. Maintaining hope, staying alert to dangers, and using clever strategies were as important as food or shelter in medieval survival. The medieval world was harsh, unforgiving, and full of uncertainty. Yet the ingenuity of ordinary people allowed them to survive through famine, disease, cold, and conflict. From foraging and preserving food to mastering herbal medicine, fire management, and community cooperation, these survival hacks reveal a remarkable human capacity for adaptation. By examining how people in the Middle Ages coped with scarcity and danger, we not only gain insight into their resilience, but also a deep appreciation for the creativity and knowledge that sustained life in one of history's most challenging eras. Their strategies, born of necessity, remind us that survival often depends on a mix of practical skills, social networks, and the indomitable human spirit.